I found out when I was 10 years old that I was a natural born long distance runner. After my success in races over the country, I was told on a number of occasions by different people that my number one focus had to be running because then I would be set. Well, one of my coaches told me the exact opposite. He said that school would always be the most important thing in my life and that it would be the key to my future. And now I am so glad that he did say that, because when I got a knee injury that kept me from ever competing again, I still had a plan to get into college and for the rest of my life. And while I can't say that everyone's experience is going to be the same as mine, I still believe that it is imperative that schools should always be a student athlete's main priority. After all, like Eliza Wapner said in the Silver Chips Pro and Con article, students should be required to meet academic standards to play on Blair sports teams. Sports should require discipline, time management, commitment, and perseverance, all key lessons in life. If student athletes can't apply these lessons in both their academics and sports, then how can they learn to apply them in the rest of their lives? First, I will be discussing what the NCAA expects of their student athletes. Second, the balance that these student athletes have to maintain and why they must maintain it. And finally, I will be discussing the future of said student athletes. Okay, and first, let's talk about what is expected of these student athletes. As described on their website, the NCAA is the National Collegiate Athletic Association, a member-led organization dedicated to the well-being and lifelong success of college athletes. It is known for prioritizing academics and giving support systems that allow college athletes to truly thrive in their environment. With 3 divisions and over 1,000 schools in the NCAA, they lay down the law very hard, and their law for the Division I, also known as the most competitive division, academic eligibility for the first year is that the completion of high school core classes, at least a 2.3 GPA in said classes, and an SAT or ACT that matches or balances that GPA. In order to continue their eligibility throughout college, student athletes must commit to academic achievement and the pursuit of a degree, as well as maintain a good GPA. They are required to meet yearly standards that are tracked using these measures: grades, minimum credit hours per year, and progress towards earning said degree. Personally, I don't believe that the NCAA is asking for too much here, considering all of the help that they do give these students. Tutors, academic advisors, and other resources are all there to help these students succeed, and as long as they take advantage of them, I'm sure that the requirements that are given will only help shape their future and make them better and more well-rounded people. Now that I have discussed what the NCAA expects of all of its athletes, I will now be discussing the balance that student athletes have to maintain and why they must maintain it. Being involved in a competitive sport takes up a lot of energy, and even at a young age, my schedule was always packed to the max. Wake up, go to school, get in the car, do homework in the car for 1 to 2 hours, drive, go to practice, drive back home, do more homework, sleep, and then repeat. And this schedule happened 4 to 5 days each week, usually with an early race in the weekends, and killed any and all free time. I lived for 3 things: school, running, and getting over car sickness. Now that's the schedule of a 12-year-old, so think of how much more it'll be for a college student. Coach Willis of the University of South Carolina's football program, a Division I school, went into detail of what a day in the season looked like for an interview with NCSA. He said that their day started from 5 to 6 a.m. with waking up, eating breakfast, and packing for the rest of the day. Then from 6 to 8, the team would work on both strength and conditioning training. There is a 30-minute meeting, 8 to 8:30 for showering and heading to class. 9 to 2 p.m. is the time for class, and then they go and watch a game for about 30 minutes. After getting taped, practice would be 2.5 hours, before showers and training 1 hour. Dinner would be served at 7 to 7:30, and then the academic support center would be available. The day would end with finishing homework and going to bed somewhere hopefully between 9:30 and midnight. As you can see, the balance and discipline that it takes to be a student athlete is pretty crazy, yet it is important that they do it. Being a college athlete and learning to balance school and sports is a lesson to take for the rest of a person's life. It's like saying, yes, what I'm doing is difficult, but my love for it makes it all worth it, and finding something that is worth it should be taken from this experience. It is because that being a college athlete is so much more than playing a sport. It's sacrifice, determination, it's love, and it's loving what you're doing and being better for it. Now that we have learned about the time that it takes to be a student athlete, I will be discussing the future that student athletes have to look forward to. Being a student athlete is hard. Being a college student athlete, especially D1, is harder. Less than 2% of all college athletes make it pro. So what does that mean for the majority? Well, most college athletes are playing for their education and for their future. These athletes must depend on their education and the things that they learned during their time in college to help them get a job for the future. So while sports are important, it really should never be their everything, because it's not something that can be relied upon for the future. I mean, 2% isn't a lot. Not that you have seen the odds that are for student athletes to become professionals. It's important to see a little more. There are over 173,500 student athletes in Division I programs, and from these programs, 53% receive scholarships. Seems like a lot, but that just isn't the case. As stated in the articles, students should have good grades to play sports by Marlon Rajan. Most of these scholarships are partial. This makes making the most out of college and academics all the more important, because you never really know your future, and you can't really rely on these sports and these scholarships to be making your future. Now, in conclusion, I have discussed what the NCAA expects of their students, athletes, the balance that student athletes have to maintain and why they must maintain it, and student athletes' futures, and an overall idea of why academic requirements are just so important. Being a student athlete is a lot of hard work, but it gives life lessons on what to prioritize, how to balance everything, and gives help for the future. And that's why it's imperative that college athletes take school really seriously and are held up to the same standards as every other student. As Fred Beastie stated in an article, Why Academics Matter, there is a reason that the word students is the first part of student athletes. If academics didn't matter, then the term wouldn't be student athletes. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.